I'm still very, very humble. I come from very humble beginnings, and what I do is very simple. I started off in a very small town with 1,200 people, okay? And with those 1,200 people, I was a rancher. I became a teacher because the teaching subsidized my ranching habits. And I had the perfect life. I lived in one town, I ranched in another, and I taught in a third. And all day, I got to go teach kids school. I got to come home in the evening and ride my horse. I got to work the cattle on the weekend. Life was perfect. And then I realized the three communities I lived in were all getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I started to wonder, what happens when they close the school I teach in? How far am I going to have to drive to still have a teaching job to subsidize my ranching habit? So I started to travel around and talk to people about the need to fire up our rural communities and do some economic and community building. I shot my mouth off one too many times, and that's how I got elected to the legislature. Just a warning to you, that's what happens. And the very first job I got when I got elected to the legislature was the assignment to write a rural community development strategy. So I traveled all over. There are 422 communities in Alberta. And in 2 years, I went to 200 of them, just over 200 of them, and asked people what we needed to do, and gathered information and data. And it was fantastic. I actually wrote reports that had 72 recommendations that covered health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts and culture, water, wastewater infrastructure. You name it, it covered it. Because it was not a rural agriculture strategy. It wasn't even just an economic development strategy. It was a community development strategy. So I turned it into our deputy premier, and she said, great, we'll tell people about it. So I traveled all over again, and in total I've been to over 300 of the communities in Alberta, where I told everyone what they needed to do generically around health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts, culture, water, wastewater infrastructure. You name it, it was in the report. And I thought it was great. And I was enjoying the trip. And then I got a little bit frustrated because I was on my way to this community for the third time. And I realized they weren't listening. Nobody was listening. I told them in every single presentation I made about health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts, culture, water, wastewater infrastructure. In every single presentation, I said at the beginning that the government can come in with a generic report like I wrote to give you some advice on what to do. It can even come up with money, which we did, which we could give to communities to support their initiatives. But as soon as the money ran out, and as soon as I left town with my plan, it would be done. Because it wasn't their plan. The people in the community had to decide what their future was going to be. I said it at the beginning of every presentation. I said it at the end of every presentation. I put it in the report at the beginning and the end. And yet, on my way to this community, for the third time, I realized that the first two times, they called me up a couple weeks later and said, Doug, what are you going to do to save our town? They missed the point. It was up to them. So I had kind of an epiphany. It was more like a re-epiphany. You see, I told you I was a teacher, right? I taught junior high, but I went and talked to high school students all the time about how to be successful. You know, work hard, study hard, don't do drugs, marry someone nice. That's sort of the top four. And so I would tell them, and they'd all look at me like, we know, everyone tells me that. Thanks. They didn't change what they were doing. So I went into the classroom one day when I was still a teacher. I walked in, and I opened the door, and I looked at the class, and by the time I shut the door and went to the front, I realized I needed to change what I was doing. So I looked at the high school students, and I said, I want you to describe to me what it would look like if you ruined your life. And they'd all start thinking for a bit, and then pretty soon they'd start putting their hand up. So I asked them what they had, and they'd start saying things like, I'd become a drug addict. So I'd write that on the board. They'd say, well, I would fail out of school, so I couldn't get a good job and take care of my family. So I'd write that on the board. They'd say things like, I'd get pregnant or get someone prematurely pregnant. It might not even ruin my life, but it might set me backwards. I wrote it on the board. Whatever they came up with, I wrote on the board. And then I would ask them the next question. Pretend your goal was to fail at life. How would you start today? So let's start with the first one. You want to become a drug addict. What would you do today to set yourself on that path? And one of them would put up their hand and say, well, I'd smoke a joint after school, and two kids would turn red because that's what they did yesterday. Right? I would say, okay, you want to fail out of school, what would you do? How would you start today? And someone said, fail the math test this afternoon. And then everyone would look urgent, like, are you done? I think you study. You want to get prematurely pregnant. How would you start today? And then they'd all turn red, and that would sort of end the conversation. The point is, every single one of us has hopes and dreams and goals and ambitions. We have plans for our lives. But every single one of us does things every single day that undermine that success. And it's because we always wind up trading what we want most, the big future, for what we want now. Because it's easy and it's convenient. And so I was on my way to this community for the third time, and I realized that I was watching communities sabotage their own success, just like high school students and adults and everybody else does. So I went to that community for the third time, and it was a 10-minute presentation. And all I did was talk about the top things that I saw communities doing that were sabotaging their own success. Then I got asked to do it again. Then I got asked to turn it into a weekly column. Then I got asked, pretty soon I was going to places, and it was fascinating because I would go in and I would do this short presentation, 15 minutes, and people would come up to me and they'd smile and they'd look over their shoulder to make sure no one was watching, and they'd say, guess what we did? And they'd tell me a story about what happened in the community that sabotaged their own success. So I made notes of them mentally, and I started to add it up, and it pretty soon turned into a book. And that's why I'm here. And all I do is travel around North America where I'm invited to continue to tell people about this. Because frankly, I think I get tired. I was a politician for 13 years. I get tired when politicians say we need to do things to make families stronger. Garbage. Garbage. Families, everyone has a picture in their head about what the perfect family is like. So we create programs and policies that support families that fit that mold. But no family fits the ideal mold. No family is a mom and a dad and a son and a daughter. They're all different, and the world is very different. So our programs and policies don't fit families. My argument all the time is that if we build strong communities, families can take care of themselves. So that's why I'm doing this. And my intention is to raise an army of people from one end of the continent to the other who are going to ensure that we build strong communities, because it's the most important thing we're going to do. So I'm going to talk to you about the 13 ways to kill your community. Now, you need to know 3 things before we start. 1, there are 3 types of people in the room whenever I do this presentation. The first type of people laugh. I hope you laugh. I mean, the stories are funny. I don't dock them. They're just, lots of them are very, very funny. Feel free to laugh. And if we can't laugh at our problems, we won't be able to fix them, okay? So feel free to laugh. No worries. The second type of people that are in the room look angry. Not at me, though, but they look angry. And I can see in their eyes when I look really close. They're saying to themselves, I know who's doing that. And when I get home, he's going to get it. Right? And then there's the third type of people in the room that sit there with their arms crossed, they refuse to laugh, they refuse to smile, and the look on their face is, how dare you talk about me like that? Because they're doing this. But honestly, we all do this. I've even taught myself doing some of these things. The key is not to lay blame, the key is to stop doing them. That's why I point them out. The second thing you need to know is that I don't name any communities in the book, and I don't name any communities except for one in this speech, and that's because it's my hometown. So you're going to find out anyway. And the reason why I don't name any was just because after 4 terms in political office, I realized if you don't have to name names, that's a good thing, right? But I also realized I got a phone call when I was going to run for premier, which would be equivalent to your governor. I was running, I lost, which was all right, that was good. And I got a phone call from a lady from Texas who said, Doug, you have to come and do this presentation. We want 3 presentations. Could you come down? And I said, I can't. I'm about to run. I'm about to announce, so I can't run. And she said, okay, well, I read the book, and I know which town you're talking about in chapter 7, story 3, I think she said. And I said, oh, you do, huh? She said, if I name the town, will you admit it's them? Because I know you don't name the towns. I said, if you pick the right town, I will tell you it's them. So she told me the town in Texas. And I told her, no, it's the wrong town. She called me a liar. She openly said, you're lying. You wrote exactly what happened in that town. Exactly word for word what happened in that town. And I told her, I've never been to Texas. I don't even know the town you're talking about. The reason why I don't name names is because all of us do this, and if you name names, it's easy to point out that somebody else is doing it. With no name, you can recognize that it's you doing it. And the third thing you need to know is that no matter what you think I'm talking about, whether you think it's about infrastructure, or you think it's just about cooperation, or you think it's about tourism, whatever you think I'm talking about in the chapters, every chapter comes down to the same thing. It's about attitude. Everything is about attitude. We can only 5% of what happens to us during the day. The other 95% is how we react to it. And if you react in a bad way and say, it's never going to happen, it can't work, I'm going to fail, then you've already lost. But if you take that 5% of what happens to you and figure out a plan, a strategy, you can conquer anything. It's always about attitude.